Remember the Brady Bunch? The scene that got it taken off the air will make you gasp? I always remembered the Brady Bunch as one of those almost impossibly clean television families. Then I dug into the final days of the show and found a scene that caused a very real fight behind the cameras. And the strangest part? The scene itself wasn't what ended the series, but it exposed just how badly things had fallen apart. The scene involves orange hair. Yes, orange hair. It sounds ridiculous. But for Robert Reed, the actor who played Mike Brady, it became the final straw. And once you know what happened, that goofy little episode suddenly feels a lot more significant. Let's go backward for a moment. Picture Mike Brady, the calm father, the architect, the man who seemed capable of solving every crisis involving 6 children, 1 housekeeper, and an alarming number of teenage problems. For 5 seasons, Robert Reed was the adult center of the Brady Bunch. But by the final season, Reed was increasingly unhappy with the direction of the show. And this wasn't something that suddenly appeared overnight. Reed was a classically trained actor. He had serious dramatic ambitions. The Brady Bunch, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly broad. The stories were sillier, the situations were more exaggerated, and Reed reportedly had very different ideas about what the show should be. I find that contrast fascinating, because millions of viewers saw a perfect television father. Behind the scenes, the actor playing him was becoming increasingly frustrated with the material. And then came Greg's hair. The episode, eventually known as the Hairbrain Scheme, revolves around Bobby trying to make money by selling a hair tonic. Greg is getting ready for graduation. He tries the product, and somehow his hair turns bright orange. That's the plot. Nothing dangerous, nothing scandalous, nothing that sounds capable of destroying a television series. But Reed apparently looked at the script and had a problem with it. The story was simply too ridiculous for him, and I can almost imagine the conversation. Robert Reed had spent years trying to bring some realism to the character of Mike Brady. Now his son was walking around with orange hair because of a miracle tonic. To Reed, this wasn't just another silly story. It represented everything he had grown tired of. So he refused to appear in the episode. That decision is what makes the final episode so strange. Watch it today and you might barely notice at first. Mike Brady is simply gone. Not dramatically. Nobody announces that something terrible happened. He's just out of town. Carol explains his absence, and the show continues. But there's something weird about watching a family sitcom's final episode and realizing its father isn't even there, especially when that absence happened because the actor refused to perform the material. That still surprises me. And there's another detail that makes the story even more interesting. The cast and crew apparently didn't necessarily know they were filming the final episode. There wasn't some giant farewell. No emotional goodbye around the kitchen table. No final moment where everyone realized television history was being made. They were simply making another episode, and then the series ended. But here's where the famous myth needs some correcting. People sometimes say the orange hair episode got the Brady Bunch banned or taken off the air. That's not really what happened. The episode did not single-handedly cause ABC to cancel the series. The show had already completed enough episodes to become extremely valuable in syndication, even though it wasn't a huge ratings powerhouse during its original run. ABC ultimately chose not to renew it, so the orange hair didn't kill the Brady Bunch. But it did reveal something. The relationship between Robert Reed and the producers had reached a breaking point, and that may actually be more interesting than a cancellation story, because the Brady family looked perfect. The production wasn't. And that wasn't the only hidden complication. Take the show's famous bathroom. 6 kids supposedly shared the bathroom, yet there was no visible toilet. Why? Because television standards in that era were remarkably conservative about showing ordinary bathroom fixtures. Today, that seems almost absurd. Back then, apparently, even a toilet could create a problem. Then there was Carol Brady's mysterious first husband. Mike was clearly a widower, but Carol's previous marriage was deliberately left vague. The show avoided getting too specific about what happened to her first husband. Again, the reason was largely about what network television considered acceptable for a family sitcom, and that's something younger viewers today might have trouble understanding. Television in the late 1960s and early 1970s had boundaries that seem almost comically strict now. The Brady children themselves were also growing up under unusual pressure. They weren't simply playing siblings, they were becoming recognizable celebrities while still being kids. Barry Williams, who played Greg, later talked openly about experimenting with marijuana as a teenager. There was even an incident when he unexpectedly had to return to the studio after thinking he had the day off. He was still affected by what he'd taken. The production noticed, and the experience became a lesson he remembered for years. Christopher Knight had his own struggles. Peter Brady was supposed to be one of the talented Brady kids, but singing wasn't exactly Knight's strength. Musical episodes made him uncomfortable. Eventually, the writers even turned his changing teenage voice into part of a storyline. What looks funny on television can feel very different when you're the teenager being laughed at. And then there's Maureen McCormick. To America, Marcia Brady seemed confident, beautiful, popular, almost untouchable. But McCormick later described a much more complicated experience behind that image. After the show ended, she struggled with substance abuse and personal difficulties before eventually getting sober and rebuilding her life. That contrast gets me every time. The Brady kids looked like they had everything, but growing up in front of millions of people doesn't make adolescence easier.